one of the things when somebody comes to me and they'll say, man, I'm hitting my driver pretty good, but my irons are a disaster. And I'll say, well, what's going on? Well, they're all going to the right. And I'll say, are they going high right or are they going low right? And usually they say, well, they're going pretty low. They're like a 45-degree angle over this way. And they've got the shanks. And it's a dreaded disease, most golfers will tell you. Good players get them, bad players get them. Pretty much happens to every player at one time or another. I'm going to tell you what causes them. There's several things that could be the culprit, but you'll need to figure out which one is you. And I've got some that you may not think about, so I think you'll really enjoy this video. Most higher handicaps, when they are hitting this shot for a right-handed player that's going straight to the right, most of them believe that they're hitting the toe of the club. Blows my mind, frankly, how many people tell me that that's where they're hitting it. The other people think that their club face is really open and they're coming through like this to hit it to the right. That's rarely the case as well. When you have the shanks, they go low and to the right. If you were doing it because your face was in this position, it would go high and to the right. So you should be able to tell by the ball flight that that's not what's happening. On a rare occasion, I see somebody that does in fact hit it off the toe and deflect to the right. So that's entirely possible, but it's rare that I see that. Almost everybody that I see, they'll have a white marks on this part of the club, and I'll show that to them, that this is where you're hitting. The other thing that I'll do, the first way to cure them, this is the best way to cure them that I've ever found, and it's very simple, and it doesn't cost very much money. Just go into your golf shop and ask them for an old empty box that the clubs come in. And you just need to set up and put the ball so close to the box that you maybe just have an 1/8 of an inch between the toe of the club and the box and where the ball would be centered on the club face. Undoubtedly, when I do this with somebody that has the shanks, their first swing literally will slam into that box a foot or two behind the ball. And so that's the number one thing that I see, that most people shank it because their club path on the way down is too much outside to inside, okay, whether they're left-handed or right-handed. Too much out to in gets the club head away from them and then exposes that hosel. Most people, in fact, that I see, the club face is actually closed as well. Even though the ball's going to the right, the ball hits the hosel, never hits the face, and in a split second goes to the right. You can tell if that's you as well, because if you're shank, 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 and then you don't hit the hosel, your ball's going to go 25 or 30 yards to the left. So I see that all the time. So this box will tell you if you're making a path mistake that's causing you to hit the hosel. So you can do that two ways. Outside in hits the box before the ball, and then inside out would hit the box after the ball, and either direction can cause you to hit it on the hosel. I would tell you though, 75–80% of the time, what I see is too steep outside in for most players that are hitting the hosel. So what makes you do that? Well, a couple things. So before I tell you, this box though is the way to learn. Go to the driving range, hit a bucket of balls, put this box down, especially if you're a pretty good player that's played for a long time. In a bucket of balls, you ought to be able to figure out how to hit the ball, not the box. And that's very important. I think the more you think about technique and trying not to shank, most players end up shanking worse. So I like things that make you do what's correct with not much thought. Hit the ball, don't hit the box. Pretty simple, but it'll probably, in my experience, be the best way to learn. Other players, you know, you can see I have an alignment stick here. That doesn't work. It sits too low to the ground. You can still come outside in and shank it and not hit this alignment stick on the ground. Doesn't work. You need something pretty tall. That's why this cardboard, even a shoe box, will work. But I like a pretty long box, have the ball pretty much in the middle of it, and it'll make all the difference in the world if you have the S words. So that's what I would tell you. So use this box. It'll really, really, really improve you immediately. Little off the subject, this is probably one of the best training aids for driver too. Use a box, tee the ball up, have your toe of your driver almost touching the box, just 1/8 of an inch maybe away. Have the ball teed up to where you have center contact. Great driver practice too. So I like this. I use this box a lot. The other thing I would tell you, I find some really talented players that can swing and not hit this box, but they're actually then would hit it off the toe or the club too much, that they just make sure it doesn't hit the box. If that happens to you, just simply take a little hand towel or your head cover, and you can put that in this side. And so now I have to swing, miss the box, and also miss this towel. I usually leave quite a bit of room here so that the shaft doesn't hit the towel. But so that'd be pretty good practice to keep you from cheating and just swinging in here too much, making sure you're missing the box. The box is pretty intimidating at first, I'll warn you. So I make a mistake this way, hitting the box before the ball. If I'm hitting the box after the ball, it'll start pointing that direction. So you ought to be able to figure out pretty quickly whether you're in to out too much or out to in. But if I'm a betting man, I'm going to bet out to in, because I'm going to win more money, because 80% of the people are out to in. I'm only going to lose 2 out of 10 bets. So what causes us to hit the box? It's usually your takeaway. So we've discussed takeaways in other videos, but the biggest mistake that I see is too flat a takeaway. So if you're using my flashlight stick, it's a great training aid if you got the Shanks, because almost everybody that would shank it, they'll see this light is going to point way over here on the other side, and once I get too flat, then my downswing is going to come over. So usually what I find with most players is when they're hitting the hosel, is their first move back is the club's way too late off in this position here. And once they're here, if they stay there, they're going to go that way and shank it, or they're going to go this way and shank it. And most people go that way. And so takeaway is really important. You know, as this handle hinges, I need to have it to point at my target line, or even steeper, but at least at the target line. If I'm pointing over the target line, boy, I'm in big trouble, especially if I've been hitting it on the hosel. The other thing that I see where people hit it on the hosel is similar, but I see a lot of people that set up and then their hands, as they go back, work away from them. And so once my hands get further away from my body than when I started, well, my club's going to swing farther away from me on the way down. It only has to swing 1.5 inches farther away to hit this hosel. So I see that a lot where people's hands go work away from them. They don't really turn their body, and then they get out here. One of the things that helped me as an instructor and how I learned to teach was I worked at a public golf course called Mid Rivers Golf Links. It's a housing development now. But in the John Daly and the Tiger Woods boom, St. Charles County, Missouri was booming, and all these people were moving out in our area, and they wanted to learn to play golf. They watched John Daly, and they watched Tiger Woods in the early 90s, and we had a big rush of new golfers. And so I would have, as a public course, I didn't have people that played all their life and grew up with it. I had construction workers that would come to me for a lesson, and they would have boots on and their tank tops, and they'd been working all day, and they're coming from a golf lesson. Most of these guys were huge and ripped, okay? And so those guys are the toughest ones to teach to play because they almost all shank it at first. They're so thick in their pecs and in their biceps and triceps that their arms get out way away from them, and they have a hard time controlling that club head down at the bottom. So I had to learn early on as a young pro how to get these guys to keep them from shanking, because they would literally could shank 200 balls in a row at the driving range. I mean, nonstop. And so I had to teach them with their arms and how to use those correctly. And then by using this box, if they were stubborn enough to practice a little bit, was the only way they could learn not to do it. Big-breasted women have the same issue. And so what tends to happen with those big-chested, strong guys and big-breasted women is their arms work out away from them as they swing because they're trying to have some freedom of motion, but they have a hard time swinging farther away from that. So I try to get those players to feel that these arms are on top of their chest more at address, more like this, and so they can take the club back and their arms can stay in front of them a lot better. But so women and really strong men, that'll help you. And so the other thing that I would tell you with the shanks that's often overlooked, especially with really good players. I mean 5 handicaps, plus 2 handicaps that get the shanks. One of the things that I watch is I stand like where the camera is behind somebody. I watch the bill of their cap. If I can tell they don't have a path problem, but they're still hitting the hosel, what's going on most of the time is that their head on the backswing is going down. And when that happens, my shoulders and everything get closer to the ball. And so I stand from behind those players and I line up the bill of their cap or their forehead on something in the distance, and I can watch and see if that head goes down. And most of those good players, when they shank it, their head will go down and then they'll stay there, and then they'll be swinging farther away from the ball and they'll hit the hosel. The reason that happens, I believe, for most of them is because their takeaway is too low on the backswing. See, if by the time I'm here, I should be like this, you'll see I haven't changed my level. But if I lower this head down, I have to dip my spine angle to do that. And so that's what I find is they're trying to do a really low takeaway, and then their head and all that's moving down. Sometimes you'll see them move this way in transition and they'll get closer to the ball too. So video yourself from behind and pay attention. Watch the bill of your cap. Are you dipping down like this? Boy, that'll be a light bulb for you when you see it if you have the shanks. Are you dipping on the way down? I don't see that as much as I see it on the way back. So really check on that takeaway that you're not dipping with your head. And if you'll learn to do that and learn to watch for that, it'll really help you. And so put the box down, Try to stay tall. If you are dipping on the way back, then these hands need to hinge this club sooner. You're going too long back without hinging. And so I see that a lot with really good players that can't understand why those shanks show up every once in a while. The other thing I would tell you is this. Most people tell me when they have the shanks that my woods are fine. Don't shank my woods. Well, the woods don't have a hosel like the irons. So when you hit it on the heel too much with woods, you either hit ground balls that most people think they're topping, or you actually deflect it to the left. So you'll hit driver ground balls left when you hit the heel too much, and you'll hit irons 45 degrees to the right when you hit the hosel too much, unless you hit the hosel so directly with an iron that it just goes straight and on the ground. And I have a lot of people that come to me and they are literally hitting the ball right here, and it's just ground. They say, I'm topping it, and they're not topping it. They're hitting the hosel so bad that it's just a ground ball in front of them. So if you see that like this hosel's in front of the face, can you see that? But see, this face is in front of the hosel. So do you see how that's different? This is back here, and the face is out in front of this shaft. So the ball, even if it hits here, doesn't hit the shaft. And then the same thing here, though. See, this is out in front of the hot. So if I hit here, it's going to go there before it hits the face. So if I have both of those together, you ought to be able to see the difference where the hosel is in each. So it's the worst shot in golf. Everybody hates it. And the last point I'll make about the shanks is that they are mental, okay? They're physical, but they're also mental. And that's why once you start, most people can't stop. And so what the reason for that is, and I've just learned this from people a lot smarter than me, but the way our subconscious works is that it works with visualization and pictures, just like a snapshot or a video. And so your subconscious doesn't know do not. It only knows do. So it doesn't hear the contraction of don't. It hears do. So when you say don't shank it, your subconscious does not understand it that way. It thinks you want to shank it. When you get this image, this terrible feeling of this shot, and this terrible image of this shot going to the right, Patrick will probably, from our last video before this one, show you one going over there. But when you hit that shot, you get such a vivid image in your mind of that terrible shot. Your subconscious, though, thinks that's what you want to do, so it keeps performing that shot over and over and over. So you have to have success and start hitting the ball in the middle of the club face again to get rid of those images. But the best thing you can do is by using this box. The other thing I tell people, if you have a 7-wood, if you have a 5-wood, practice with those. They don't have hosels. They're flatter shafted clubs. Your mistake's probably too flat, so you're not making as big a mistake with that. And then you can get some success with your fairway woods, and you can work back down to your irons. I have had the shanks before when I was learning how to play. I was a good player, scratched probably already, and I'd go to the driving range every night, and every once in a while I'd start shanking every single shot. And what I learned for me, this is before I knew about this box, what I learned for me was to hit my 5-wood. And at least I could get it airborne and pretty straight, and I could work my way out of it, or I would simply go practice chipping. I'm not going to, don't beat yourself up. If you got the shanks and you can't get rid of them, don't beat yourself up. Do something productive. And so I would go chip. I'd go putt. I'd hit my 5-wood instead of my sand wedges. For most good players are always shanking it with their wedges. And the reason why is the shaft angles with wedges are other than your putter, are the steepest wedges or the steepest shaft angles in your bag. Most people shank it because they're too flat. So when you're too flat with a steep club, you're in big trouble. And so that's why getting a longer, flatter club can at least get you some confidence back. But the best way to do it is how I open this video. If you're shanking it, get you an old club box and practice with it, and they'll be cured. If you got questions or comments, if there's something I didn't cover that maybe you found that helps you, let us know. I'd be glad to learn something as well too. But that's my experience with the shanks, and I've dealt with thousands of people over the years that shanked it, and I'm pretty good at fixing them. So I think all this stuff will help.